In the vastness of space, far beyond the reaches of Earth's familiar skies, humanity had quietly built a new chapter for itself. The 22nd century had brought technological marvels, and humans were no longer confined to their home planet. Colonies floated like tiny jewels around Mars, Titan, and distant moons, each one a testament to human ambition and ingenuity. While they had made contact with other civilizations in neighboring systems, humans were still seen as newcomers, clever but not particularly threatening. They were respected for their curiosity and ability to adapt, but no one in the galaxy truly feared them. Earth itself had grown accustomed to this quiet existence, trusting that the distance and the unknown would keep humans safe from the dangers that lurked in the dark, silent stretches of space. Aboard the research vessel Orion's Watch, drifting in one of the quieter sectors far from established human routes, life moved at a steady, almost hypnotic pace. The ship itself was a marvel, a combination of human engineering and alien-inspired design, with sleek lines and modular compartments designed for both comfort and efficiency. It was commanded by Captain Irene Valdez, a seasoned veteran of interstellar travel, whose calm demeanor and quick decision-making had earned the respect of her crew. Among the crew, Dr. Elias Monroe stood out not for his command experience, but for his unparalleled skill in communications and signal analysis. He had spent years decoding alien languages, understanding faint patterns in the electromagnetic spectrum, and making sense of signals that often seemed to carry secrets of the cosmos itself. It was during one of these long, silent nights, when the Orion's Watch glided silently through a field of distant stars, that something unusual happened. Dr. Monroe was in the communications bay, surrounded by banks of screens and flickering consoles. His fingers danced across the holographic interface, scanning frequencies that most humans would never dream of listening to. The soft hum of the ship, combined with the faint blinking of distant starlight through the observation windows, created a feeling of both serenity and isolation. It was a moment of routine monotony, the kind that made even the most experienced crew members feel like they were floating in a dream. Then the signal appeared. At first, it was barely noticeable, a tiny fluctuation in the electromagnetic readings, so subtle that it could have been dismissed as background noise, but Monroe's trained eyes caught it immediately. There was something deliberate about it, something that hinted at intelligence. The pattern was irregular, fragmented, almost like a cry for help hidden beneath layers of encryption and interference. He leaned forward, adjusting the sensors and filters, and the signal became slightly clearer, though it was still difficult to interpret. His heart quickened, a feeling he rarely allowed himself to indulge in during professional work. There was a sense that this was not just another anomaly. This was something alive, something reaching out across the void with urgency. Captain Valdez was summoned to the communications bay, her footsteps echoing softly along the metallic corridors. When she saw the readings, her brow furrowed. "Where is it coming from?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with curiosity. Monroe shook his head. "I'm not entirely sure. The signal is layered, encrypted in a way I haven't seen before, but it's definitely intelligent. It sounds desperate." The word hung in the air, heavy and full of implication. A desperate signal in the middle of deep space could mean many things: distress, a trap, or something entirely beyond human comprehension. The crew debated the risks. It was well known that unknown signals in uncharted regions often led to disaster. There were countless stories of vessels lured into ambushes, entire crews disappearing without a trace. Some argued that they should ignore it, stay on their planned route, and report the anomaly to Earth's Central Command, but curiosity and a deep-seated sense of duty prevailed. Humanity's history was full of stories where people chose the uncertain path and discovered something extraordinary. Monroe, with his knowledge of alien communications, was especially persuasive. "We can't ignore it," he said. "If someone or something's out there in trouble, we have a chance to help. And who knows what we might learn in the process." With careful planning, the decision was made to trace the origin of the signal. The Orion's Watch altered its course, engines humming softly as the vessel changed direction. The journey into uncharted space was tense but exhilarating. Crew members moved with quiet efficiency, preparing the ship for any possible scenario. Sensors were recalibrated, defensive systems brought online, and emergency protocols reviewed. Each person knew that they were stepping into the unknown, but there was a shared sense of purpose that bound them together as they approached the source of the signal. The first visual confirmation came. A structure drifted silently in the void, a small, alien station, battered and partially derelict. Its design was unlike anything humans had built. With sharp angles and a metallic sheen that reflected distant starlight in eerie patterns, the station's surface bore marks of conflict, scorch marks, deep dents, and signs of mechanical failure. Monroe studied it intently. The distress signal had originated from this station, and whatever or whoever had sent it, it was in serious trouble. The initial scans revealed that the station's systems were failing. Life support was unstable, gravity fields fluctuated, and automated defenses were activating at random. Monroe's fingers flew across his console as he tried to access the station's communications core. Every attempt was met with interference, encrypted loops, and erratic feedback. It was as if the station itself was struggling to maintain a voice, a cry that wanted to be heard but was fighting against overwhelming odds. The crew of the Orion's Watch exchanged tense glances. They had anticipated danger, but nothing had prepared them for the fragility and desperation emanating from this drifting structure. As they prepared to dock, sudden turbulence shook the vessel. The station's magnetic field was unstable, and nearby asteroid fragments created additional hazards. Lieutenant Sato, the engineering officer, coordinated with the ship's thrusters, making micro-adjustments to avoid collisions. Every second counted. One wrong move could destroy the Orion's Watch, and yet the crew pressed on. Guided by Monroe's careful calculations and the shared determination to reach the source of the distress, Monroe managed to decipher fragments of the message. It revealed that an alien faction, previously unknown to humans, was under siege by a vastly superior force. The distress call was a plea for help, hinting at the presence of a powerful weapon, a deterrent kept secret for centuries, capable of immense destruction. The realization hit the crew hard. They were no longer dealing with a simple rescue mission. They had stumbled into a situation with enormous stakes, one that could change the balance of power in this sector of space. The moral dilemma weighed heavily. Intervening meant risking their lives and potentially awakening a power that humanity was not prepared to control. Ignoring it could mean letting an entire civilization perish. Captain Valdez convened a briefing with the senior crew, outlining the risks and potential outcomes. Voices were measured but tense, opinions varied, but the decision was unanimous. They would proceed. Humanity had always been defined by its willingness to face the unknown, to push boundaries, and to act when others hesitated. As the Orion's Watch moved closer to the station, the crew felt the tension and anticipation building. Every sensor reading, every flicker of light, every faint hum of energy was a reminder that they were stepping into uncharted territory. The line between courage and recklessness was thin, but they had chosen this path together. Dr. Monroe continued to work on deciphering the message, his mind racing to understand the technology and the intentions behind it. Each breakthrough brought them closer to the truth, but also closer to danger. The first chapter of their journey was ending, but it was only the beginning of a story that would test every limit of human ingenuity, courage, and morality. A simple distress call had reached across the emptiness of space and found its way to humanity. It was quiet at first, almost imperceptible, but now it had awakened something more than curiosity. It had awakened a sense of responsibility, a realization that humans were about to encounter challenges far greater than any they had faced before. And as the Orion's Watch drew alongside the alien station, the crew braced themselves for whatever lay within, ready to step into a story that would change the manned humanity forever. As the Orion's Watch carefully approached the derelict alien station, the atmosphere aboard the ship grew tense. The crew moved like a well-oiled machine, each member aware of their role, but an unspoken anxiety hung in the air. Space travel often demanded precision, but this situation was unlike any training exercise or routine mission. The signal they had followed, fragile yet urgent, now seemed to pulse with life, as if the station itself was calling out, begging for help. Monroe had been working tirelessly to decode fragments of the message, and the deeper he went, the more he realized the situation was far more serious than they had initially imagined. The first scans of the station revealed extensive damage. Its hull was riddled with scars from what appeared to be heavy bombardment, and parts of the structure floated loosely around it. Patches of the station were dark, lifeless and cold, while other sections flickered with faint energy readings. It was clear that the station had been abandoned in a hurry, or perhaps its crew had been incapacitated. Automated defense systems still operated sporadically, activating lasers, shields, and energy turrets without pattern, creating a hazardous environment for anyone trying to dock. Every approach required split-second calculations to avoid being torn apart by the station's own mechanisms. Lieutenant Sato took command of the navigation, guiding the ship with precise movements. The station's gravitational anomalies added complexity to an already dangerous approach. Monroe monitored communications, picking up fragmented bursts of data that hinted at the scale of the crisis. The distress call wasn't just a simple SOS, it spoke of a desperate fight for survival, of civilians trapped inside, and of a weapon that could turn the tide of an entire war. Humanity had never encountered such a situation before, and the implications weighed heavily on the crew. Every decision they made now could have consequences far beyond themselves. The crew debated their options. Approaching too quickly risked collision with the station or triggering its defensive systems, while lingering too far away could result in the loss of critical information and lives. Captain Valdez maintained calm authority, weighing each risk. "We are not just observers," she reminded the team. "We are here because someone needs help. Proceed carefully, but proceed. We cannot ignore this." Her words reinforced the sense of duty that each crew member felt. Humanity had always been defined by its resilience and courage, and now they had the chance to prove it once again. As they moved closer, Monroe managed to isolate a clearer fragment of the distress message. It revealed more details about the attackers and the situation aboard the station. The alien faction, unknown to human records, had been under siege by a vastly superior military force. Entire sections of the station had been destroyed, and critical systems were failing. But perhaps most startling was the reference to a powerful weapon, a secret deterrent that had been kept hidden for centuries. The message hinted that the weapon could annihilate entire fleets, yet it had not been activated. Its existence was a closely guarded secret. The realization hit the crew. They were not merely rescuing survivors. They had stumbled into a potential turning point in interstellar warfare. The tension aboard the Orion's watch escalated when the station's automated defenses became more aggressive. Turrets activated without warning, energy fields fluctuated, and small drones patrolled the corridors. Monroe and the engineering team worked furiously to override some of the defensive systems. While the bridge crew coordinated maneuvers to avoid damage, the ship shook as it narrowly avoided laser blasts and erratic energy surges. Every crew member felt the stakes rising. This was no longer just a matter of rescue. It had become a test of skill, strategy, and nerve. Despite the danger, Monroe made a breakthrough. He discovered a backdoor in the station's communications network, an ancient security measure designed to allow allies to send encoded signals without interference. Through this channel, he pieced together fragments of the station's history. The alien faction had been a scientific and exploratory society, dedicated to discovery rather than conquest. The attackers, in contrast, were a militaristic force, focused solely on domination and destruction. The distress message was not just a plea for survival, it was a warning about the kind of power they were protecting, something that could reshape the balance of power in this sector of space. The crew realized that approaching the station meant more than physical danger. It also meant moral responsibility. They were stepping into a conflict that was not theirs, with consequences they could barely comprehend. Yet the human instinct to help prevailed. Monroe's fingers flew across his console, translating symbols, decrypting layers, and assembling a picture of what had occurred. Sections of the station's interior were collapsing, but Monroe detected faint life sign survivors trapped inside, waiting, hoping, praying that someone would arrive. Each pulse on the monitor reminded the crew why they could not turn away. Navigating the hazards became a battle of patience and precision. The Orion's watch carefully aligned its docking systems, avoiding debris and unstable structures. The station seemed almost alive, reacting unpredictably to their approach. Monroe's console flickered with urgent warnings, while Sato's voice remained steady, directing every adjustment. The docking sequence took hours, each moment stretching the crew's nerves to the limit. Small mistakes could be fatal, yet the team's cohesion and training allowed them to succeed where lesser crews might have failed. Finally, the ship was securely docked, though the station's unstable hull made it feel like stepping onto a minefield. The crew donned their protective suits and prepared to enter. Every member knew the risks: structural collapse, malfunctioning defense systems, and possible hostile encounters. They moved cautiously, guided by Monroe's data feeds, which highlighted areas of life support and energy surges. As they stepped into the station, the silence was overwhelming. It was the silence of a place abandoned in panic, of corridors once filled with activity now echoing only with their footsteps. Inside, the crew witnessed the aftermath of chaos. Broken machinery, scorched walls, and evidence of struggle were everywhere. Monroe's analysis suggested that the station had been under attack for weeks, and that the alien faction had fought valiantly but been overwhelmed in most areas. Yet signs of life persisted. Small shelters, emergency rations, and damaged yet functioning medical stations hinted that survivors might still be alive, clinging to hope. Each discovery heightened the tension. The crew understood that time was critical. The station could fail entirely if they did not act swiftly. That as they ventured deeper, the complexity of the distress message became apparent. The alien faction had encrypted critical information across multiple systems, including the location and nature of the secret weapon. Monroe realized that accessing this information would not be simple. It required not only technical skill but intuition and careful interpretation. They could not simply press buttons or hack a terminal. Every action had to be deliberate. The crew split into teams, each assigned to different sections, communicating constantly to coordinate efforts. This was not just a mission of rescue, but a test of human adaptability and intelligence. The situation escalated further when Monroe discovered traces of an alien communication network that suggested the attackers were still nearby, monitoring the station remotely. They had likely detected the distress signal and might already be tracking the Orion's watch. This revelation added urgency to every movement. The crew had to act quickly but cautiously, balancing the need for speed with the need for safety. Monroe's analysis became the guiding force, directing them to the areas where survivors and critical systems could be accessed first. Hours turned into days as the crew worked tirelessly. They encountered sporadic automated defenses, damaged corridors, and failing energy systems. Yet every obstacle overcame strengthened their resolve. The crew's determination combined with Monroe's analytical genius and Sato's engineering expertise, allowed them to navigate hazards that would have overwhelmed ordinary humans. The sense of responsibility both to the alien faction and to the wider universe kept them focused even as fatigue set in. By the time they reached the central hub of the station, the crew had gathered substantial information. The attackers were formidable, the weapon real and dangerous, but there was hope. Monroe managed to stabilize part of the station's communication core, allowing clearer messages to pass through. They learned that the alien faction had been trying to protect the weapon, hoping it would never be used recklessly. Humanity had inadvertently become a key player in a conflict far beyond their own history or understanding. The realization weighed heavily, but it also illuminated a path forward. Careful intervention could save lives and prevent catastrophe. The rising challenge of the mission had revealed not just the dangers of space and alien technology, but the depths of human courage and ingenuity. The crew of the Orion's Watch had faced unknown forces, life-threatening hazards, and the moral weight of deciding who and what should be saved. Each step they took, each risk they calculated, brought them closer to understanding the full magnitude of the distress call. It was a test not just of skill, but of humanity itself, the ability to confront the unknown, protect the innocent, and act with wisdom in the face of overwhelming odds. They were in the heart of a conflict they barely understood, with knowledge that could either save or destroy. The alien station had revealed the stakes, the survivors, and the weapon, but it had also warned of the dangers yet to come. The rising challenge was complete. The crew had reached the point where every decision mattered, and the future of many lives depended on their courage, intelligence, and determination. The journey ahead promised even greater tests. As the crew prepared to confront not only the perils of the station but the larger conflict that awaited them beyond its walls. The crew of the Orion's Watch had spent days navigating the damaged corridors of the alien station, stabilizing systems, and decoding fragments of the distress call. Each success revealed just how dangerous the situation had become. What had initially seemed like a desperate plea for help was now a full-scale crisis, involving not only the survival of the alien faction but also a weapon of unimaginable power. The crew's minds were racing constantly, balancing technical calculations, moral decisions, and the ever-present fear that any wrong move could lead to disaster. But nothing could have prepared them for the moment when the escalation truly began. It started with a blip on the long-range sensors, a massive object moving at incredible speed through the void, closing in on their position. At first, the readings were almost impossible to interpret. The object was enormous, far larger than any human warship, with a design that defied conventional understanding. It was clearly military in nature, with layers of shielding and weapons systems visible even from a distance. The attackers, it seemed, had been tracking the distress signal all along. Monroe stared at the console, his mind racing. "They're here," he said quietly. "They know we're involved, and they're not coming to negotiate." The crew moved instantly into action. Captain Valdez ordered defensive systems to full readiness. Shields were raised, and weapon systems armed. For the first time, the crew realized that their mission had escalated from rescue and exploration to full combat readiness. The alien station, already unstable and dangerous, became a potential death trap. Every corridor, every room, every system could be used against them if the attackers chose to strike directly. Monroe worked furiously to interpret the station's sensors and communications, hoping to find a way to anticipate enemy movements. As the massive warship drew closer, the scale of the threat became terrifyingly clear. The attackers were not just a small raiding party, they were a well-coordinated, heavily armed force, capable of obliterating the station and the Orion's Watch in minutes. Drones launched from the approaching ship, skimming past debris fields and weaving through the station's defenses. Energy beams streaked across space, and explosions illuminated the darkness outside. The crew of the Orion's Watch had never experienced a battle of this scale. Their training was extensive, but nothing had prepared them for facing an enemy of such size and sophistication, especially while navigating a fragile, damaged station. Inside the station, tension reached a breaking point. Monroe had been working to access the control systems of the secret weapon mentioned in the distress call. Every second mattered, because the attackers were closing in. It became clear that the only way to protect the station, and possibly save the survivors, was to understand the weapon and determine whether it could be used to neutralize the threat. But there was a risk. Activating such a device could have catastrophic consequences if mishandled. Monroe felt a knot of fear tighten in his chest. This was no longer about decoding signals or stabilizing systems. It was about making life or death decisions with consequences that could ripple across the galaxy. As they reached the central control hub of the station, the crew was met with another shocking revelation. The weapon was not simply a device of raw firepower, it was intelligent in a sense, integrated with the station's systems and capable of responding to its environment. Monroe's hands flew over the controls, inputting commands, interpreting alien logic, and carefully navigating security protocols. The system seemed almost alive, responding to human interaction with subtle feedback, testing their understanding. Each successful maneuver brought them closer to harnessing the weapon's potential. but each mistake could trigger a catastrophic response. Suddenly, the station shuddered violently. The attackers had begun targeting critical points, firing energy weapons designed to bypass shields and disrupt structural integrity. Explosions rocked the corridors, sending sparks and debris flying. Crew members were thrown to the ground, alarms blared, and the sense of danger became immediate and tangible. Captain Valdez barked orders, directing the team to secure themselves and continue their work. Monroe, despite the chaos, remained focused on the controls. He knew that if they could activate even a fragment of the weapon's power, they might be able to defend the station long enough to save the survivors. Lieutenant Sato coordinated with the engineering team to stabilize failing systems. Power surges threatened to overload circuits, and structural supports groaned under strain. Every action required precision and speed. The crew moved like a single organism, communicating constantly, anticipating each other's moves, and adapting to unpredictable conditions. The station's AI, partially restored through Monroe's efforts, began assisting by rerouting power, sealing damaged sections, and providing tactical information about the attacker's approach. It was as if the station itself was joining the fight, recognizing that the humans had become allies in the struggle for survival. As the battle intensified, the crew realized that conventional tactics would not be enough. The attacker's firepower was immense, and the station alone could not withstand a direct assault. Monroe had an idea. If they could partially activate the weapon, they could create a defensive barrier or disrupt the enemy fleet long enough to allow the survivors to escape. It was risky, potentially catastrophic, but it might be their only option. Captain Valdez weighed the risks, her face grim but determined. "Do it," she said. "We have no choice. Humanity doesn't back down when lives are at stake." Monroe began the delicate process of activating the weapon. It required a combination of human intuition, technical expertise, and careful interpretation of alien logic. The system responded cautiously, testing each input, confirming the crew's intentions. Slowly, energy began to build within the central core, radiating outward in a controlled yet overwhelming display of power. Outside the station, the attackers detected the change immediately. Their weapons fired in volleys, attempting to disrupt the activation. But the weapon's emerging energy created a defensive field that deflected many of the attacks. The balance of the battle shifted slightly, giving the crew a glimmer of hope. Despite the initial success, the situation remained critical. The attackers adapted quickly, sending specialized drones and focusing their fire on weak points in the station's defenses. Monroe and Sato worked furiously, rerouting power, stabilizing circuits, and countering automated attacks. Crew members in the corridors secured survivors, guiding them to safe zones while avoiding debris and hazards. Each moment was a delicate dance between life and death, requiring split-second decisions and unwavering focus. The intensity of the escalation pushed everyone to their limits, testing not only their skills but their courage, endurance, and ability to stay calm under unimaginable pressure. In the midst of the chaos, Monroe had a breakthrough. By carefully adjusting the weapon's parameters, he discovered that it could target multiple points simultaneously, creating controlled energy pulses capable of disabling enemy ships without obliterating them completely. It was the first glimmer of hope the crew had seen in days. The attackers, confident in their overwhelming superiority, had not anticipated the human ability to adapt quickly and think creatively under extreme pressure. Monroe's calculations, combined with the station's partial AI assistance, that allowed them to exploit weaknesses in the attackers' formation, turning the tide of the battle, at least slightly. The critical moment came when the attackers launched a concentrated assault on the station's central hub, the very location where the weapon was housed. Explosions rocked the corridors, and alarms blared continuously. Crew members were thrown against walls, equipment was damaged, and fires broke out in several sections. Monroe, despite being shaken by the intensity, maintained focus on the controls, his hands moving with precision and determination. The weapon responded to his commands, sending out pulses of energy that disrupted the attackers' drones and shielded key areas of the station. It was a breathtaking display of power and control, demonstrating both the potential of the weapon and the ingenuity of the humans operating it. As the attackers realized that their initial strategy was failing, they escalated further, deploying heavy assault units and concentrating fire on the station's defenses. The battle reached a fever pitch, with explosions, energy beams, and flashes of light illuminating the interior and exterior of the station. Every crew member of the Orion's Watch was operating at peak capacity, coordinating, adapting, and improvising in real time. The critical moment had arrived. They were no longer observers or rescuers. They were active participants in a life-or-death struggle that could determine the fate of the alien faction, the weapon, and potentially much more. Amid the chaos, the crew began to notice something extraordinary. The weapon, partially activated and carefully guided by Monroe, seemed to respond not just to commands but to the intent and creativity of the operators. It was as if it recognized the human's purpose, to protect life rather than destroy it recklessly. This allowed them to channel its power in controlled, precise ways, disabling enemy ships, neutralizing drones, and securing key sections of the station. The combination of human intelligence, quick thinking, and the alien technology's responsiveness created a synergy that neither side had anticipated. The attackers, overwhelmed by the unexpected resistance, began to retreat in small groups. The weapon's energy pulses had disrupted their formation, damaged critical systems, and created uncertainty. The crew, exhausted but resolute, continued to coordinate, guiding survivors to safety, stabilizing failing sections of the station, and maintaining the weapon's control. Each second felt like an eternity, but the critical moment, this intense escalation where everything hung in the balance, marked the point at which the humans proved their ability to rise to the occasion. The situation had shifted dramatically. The attackers were no longer in full control. The station's critical systems were stabilized enough to allow further operations, and the survivors were secured in safer areas. The weapon, now partially understood and carefully controlled, had demonstrated its immense potential without causing unnecessary destruction. The crew of the Orion's Watch had survived the escalation and reached a point where they could begin considering the next steps: full resolution, extraction, and the moral decisions that would follow. The events of these hours had shown the crew, and perhaps all of humanity, what they were capable of when faced with extreme danger. They had navigated chaos, made split-second decisions, and used intelligence, courage, and creativity to turn the tide in a situation that initially seemed hopeless. The escalation had tested every limit of their abilities, revealing both the danger of the universe and the extraordinary capacity of humans to rise to challenges that seemed insurmountable. The dust of battle still hung in the corridors of the alien station when the crew of the Orion's Watch began the slow, yet careful process of stabilizing their situation. The attackers had retreated, disrupted and damaged by the weapon that Dr. Monroe had managed to partially activate, but the danger had not passed entirely. Debris floated in zero-gravity corridors. Structural supports were weak in several areas, and the life signs of survivors still demanded constant attention. The ship and its crew were battered, exhausted, but alive, and the realization that they had survived the critical escalation sparked a mixture of relief and determination. The next phase of the resolution was about careful execution, a demonstration of ingenuity, and the moral responsibility of wielding a power of unprecedented potential. Monroe moved through the central hub, his eyes scanning the weapon's control interfaces, already analyzing the data streams to understand how to fully stabilize it. Unlike human systems, this weapon was semi-intelligent, designed with safeguards and logic that tested the operator's intentions. Its energy output was massive, capable of leveling fleets or entire stations if mishandled. Yet now, it had proven responsive to carefully calculated commands. Monroe realized that using it correctly was the only way to prevent further catastrophe. He shared the readings with Captain Valdez and Lieutenant Sato, explaining that while the attackers were temporarily disabled, they could return with reinforcements at any moment. Humanity's safety and the alien survivors depended on their ability to wield the weapon responsibly. The first task was securing the station itself. The explosions from the battle had caused cracks in the hull, damaged gravity generators, and destabilized sections of the structure. Crew teams moved through zero-gravity corridors with tethered lines and protective suits, carefully repairing life support systems, rerouting power, and stabilizing bulkheads. Fires that had broken out were extinguished using controlled energy suppression units, and emergency lighting guided the survivors and crew through areas that were partially dark. Every step was slow and deliberate. A single mistake could cause a catastrophic collapse. Even as they worked, alarms continued to signal minor breaches and energy fluctuations. Monroe monitored the weapon's core, adjusting outputs so that it could continue to act defensively without harming the station or the people inside. The survivors, initially terrified of the humans, began to understand that the crew of the Orion's Watch were there to help. Many were injured, exhausted and confused, having spent days or weeks trapped in sections of the station. The humans coordinated triage teams, administering medical aid, stabilizing injuries, and helping them move to safer areas. Communication was a challenge. The alien language was complex, with subtle tones and patterns that humans could only partially decode. Yet Monroe and a few crew members managed to translate essential instructions, calming panicked survivors and gaining their cooperation. These moments of human-alien interaction revealed both the universality of fear and hope, and the capacity for trust to form under extreme circumstances. Meanwhile, Monroe continued to study the weapon. He discovered that its energy pulses could be focused in precise ways, allowing them to disable specific threats rather than destroying indiscriminately. This meant that if the attackers returned, the crew could defend the station without harming civilians or causing irreversible damage. It was a delicate balance, a combination of human judgment, technical skill, and the alien technology's semi-autonomous response. Monroe shared his findings with Captain Valdez, who nodded gravely. "We now control something far beyond what anyone on Earth could imagine," she said. "It is not just a weapon, it is a responsibility." The weight of this responsibility settled over the crew. but it also strengthened their resolve. They understood that the choices they made now could set a precedent for humanity's future encounters in the galaxy. The possibility that the attackers would regroup and return with reinforcements. Using sensors from the station and the Orion's watch, Monroe calculated possible enemy trajectories and attack patterns. He programmed the weapon to respond to incoming threats automatically, creating defensive barriers and targeted energy pulses that would neutralize enemy ships, without endangering the station or survivors. The crew simulated scenarios, running calculations repeatedly to ensure that their plan would succeed under pressure. It was a tense process. One miscalculation could trigger an uncontrollable release of energy. But slowly, the system stabilized, and confidence began to grow. At the same time, the humans worked on understanding the broader purpose of the alien weapon. Data recovered from the station indicated that it had been developed not for conquest, but for deterrence, a tool to protect a civilization far smaller than its potential adversaries. The attacker's goal had been to seize or destroy it, recognizing that control over such a weapon would allow them to dominate neighboring systems. This realization was sobering for the crew. They were no longer dealing with abstract danger or distant battles. They were managing a force capable of changing the balance of power in the galaxy. Monroe reflected on the ethical implications. The weapon could save lives if used wisely, but misuse could bring unimaginable destruction. The survivors played a key role in the resolution as well. Their knowledge of the station, the weapon, and the attackers helped Monroe and the crew understand critical systems and hidden dangers. Together, they repaired damaged conduits, rerouted power to vital sections, and prepared escape routes. The collaboration between humans and aliens highlighted a shared goal: survival. Trust, forged under extreme stress, allowed them to work with remarkable efficiency, showing that even in the most desperate circumstances, cooperation could overcome chaos. Outside the station, the crew remained vigilant. Sensor readings showed that enemy forces were regrouping in distant space, testing the limits of their communication networks. Monroe monitored these readings constantly, adjusting the weapon's output to maintain a protective shield while avoiding unnecessary energy expenditure. The station, once a crumbling and dangerous relic, had become a fortified stronghold under the combined efforts of humans and aliens. It was a testament to ingenuity, courage, and the ability to adapt under pressure. The final challenge of the resolution phase was preparing the station for possible evacuation. If the attackers returned in force, Monroe, Sato, and Captain Valdez worked together to create safe corridors, stabilize gravity fields, and establish energy barriers. The survivors were trained in emergency procedures, guided to secure locations, and equipped with necessary supplies. Every precaution was taken to ensure that, if the worst occurred, lives could still be saved. The careful planning, coordination, and execution demonstrated not only the crew's competence but the adaptability and resilience of humanity when faced with overwhelming odds. As the hours passed, the weapon reached a stable state. Its energy was controlled, focused, and responsive to human input. The station's systems, once failing and chaotic, now hummed with controlled power. Survivors were safe, threats neutralized for the moment, and the immediate crisis was under control. The crew took a moment to reflect, realizing that they had not only saved lives but also preserved a technological treasure of incredible importance. Humanity had intervened in a conflict far beyond its experience, and by acting decisively and responsibly, they had prevented what could have been a disaster of galactic proportions. Captain Valdez gathered the crew for a quiet briefing. "We have stabilized the station and the weapon. The survivors are secure, and the attackers are temporarily held off," she said. "But our responsibility does not end here. We now hold knowledge and power that others will seek. How we manage it will define humanity in this part of the galaxy." The crew nodded solemnly. They had faced death, chaos, and moral dilemmas, yet they had emerged not only alive but triumphant. The resolution was not just a technical or tactical success. It was a demonstration of human courage, ingenuity, and ethical responsibility. Monroe took a moment to review the weapons systems one last time. He realized that the true power of humanity lay not just in the weapon itself, but in their ability to think creatively, act decisively, and make difficult moral choices under pressure. The station, once a symbol of vulnerability and destruction, now stood as a testament to the synergy between human intellect and alien technology. Every member of the crew had played a role in this transformation, and the experience had permanently changed them. They had witnessed the worst and the best of what the universe could offer, and they had survived. The immediate danger was neutralized. The station was secure, the weapon stabilized, and the survivors safe. The crew of the Orion's watch had turned a desperate, chaotic situation into a controlled, successful outcome. They had demonstrated that humanity could face overwhelming challenges, make ethical decisions, and use knowledge and technology responsibly. The resolution phase was complete, but the experience left a lasting impression on everyone involved. They understood that the galaxy was vast, dangerous, and filled with unknowns, but humanity had proven it could rise to meet even the deadliest threats. After the storm of violence and chaos had passed, The crew of the Orion's Watch slowly began to process what they had accomplished. The alien station was stable, the survivors were safe, and the attackers had temporarily retreated. Yet the sense of relief was tempered by a profound awareness of responsibility. The weapon they had uncovered was no ordinary tool of war, it was a force of unimaginable power, a technological marvel that could shape the destiny of entire civilizations. In the quiet aftermath, the crew realized that the real challenge was only beginning, understanding what it meant to wield such power responsibly, and how humanity's actions in this encounter would echo through the galaxy as they prepared to depart. Dr. Monroe remained in the central hub of the station, carefully monitoring the weapon systems. The experience had changed him. What had once been abstract theories about alien technology and communications had become visceral, immediate, and life-altering. He understood now that knowledge carried weight, and that even the smallest decision could have far-reaching consequences. The weapon was no longer just a set of controls and circuits, it was a living challenge, demanding wisdom, restraint, and foresight. Monroe felt the weight of that responsibility pressing on his shoulders, but also a quiet pride in what humanity had achieved. They had faced impossible odds, and they had not only survived, they had prevailed. The survivors of the alien faction began to emerge from the station's shelters, some walking on their own, others assisted by crew members. They were weak, scared, and exhausted, but there was a glimmer of hope in their eyes. Slowly, trust began to form between humans and aliens, forged by shared struggle and the life-or decisions that had united them. Monroe and Sato assisted in coordinating their evacuation to safe zones within the station, ensuring that medical supplies and energy shields protected them from lingering dangers. Communication was painstaking, with the alien language complex and nuanced, but even partial understanding was enough to convey the essential message: the humans had saved them. Gratitude was expressed in gestures, tones, and subtle signals, and the crew felt a quiet warmth in knowing that their actions had meaning beyond their own. Survival Captain Valdez gathered her senior officers for a final briefing aboard the Orion's Watch. The conversation was serious, reflective, and tinged with both pride and caution. "We have stabilized the station, protected the survivors, and prevented the attackers from seizing the weapon," she said. "But our responsibility does not end here. The existence of this technology, and our knowledge of it, changes everything. We must consider how to protect it, who should know of it, and how humanity will approach the power we now hold." The crew listened intently, recognizing that their journey had been about more than courage in battle. It was about ethics, foresight, and the consequences of wielding power wisely. The aftermath was also a period of personal reflection. Each crew member grappled with what they had witnessed and done. Monroe considered the many lives that had been at risk, the lives they had saved, and the lives that might still be endangered if the weapon fell into the wrong hands. He thought about the attackers, about their motivation and ambition, and about the fact that humanity had been drawn into a conflict far beyond its own experience. For the first time, the crew understood that space exploration was not just about discovery, it was about responsibility. Every encounter, every decision, had the potential to ripple outward, affecting countless others in ways they might never see. The survivors' stories were slowly revealed. They described days of desperation, the constant threat of attack, and their efforts to protect the secret weapon from falling into enemy hands. These narratives provided crucial context, giving the humans insights into the alien faction's culture, values, and the ethical principles that had guided them in designing and safeguarding the weapon. It became clear that the weapon had been intended not for conquest but as a deterrent, a safeguard against aggression. The humans were now custodians of that legacy, and the realization added a layer of gravity to their mission. They had not simply saved lives, they had inherited a responsibility to protect a powerful tool with enormous potential consequences. As the Orion's Watch prepared to depart, Monroe conducted a thorough review of the weapon's capabilities and limitations. He compiled a detailed report, noting not just technical specifications but also the moral considerations necessary for its use. The crew discussed contingency plans, emergency protocols, and strategies for safeguarding the technology against misuse. Even as they completed the practical aspects of the mission, the ethical implications loomed large. Humanity had been given a glimpse of power that few civilizations ever encounter, and with it came a challenge: to wield it wisely, to balance strength with restraint, and to avoid the temptations of arrogance or recklessness. Outside the station, the galaxy continued its indifferent drift. The attackers, though temporarily thwarted, remained a potential threat. The crew knew that they could return, possibly with reinforcements, and that future encounters might require difficult choices. Yet there was also a sense of quiet optimism. Humanity had demonstrated adaptability, intelligence, and courage under circumstances that would have overwhelmed most other civilizations. They had confronted fear, chaos, and moral complexity, and had emerged not only alive but capable of making decisions that balanced survival with ethical responsibility. The resolution of the immediate crisis had revealed the deeper qualities that defined humanity: ingenuity, empathy, and the capacity to rise to the challenge when circumstances demanded it most. The aftermath of this resolution would not be immediate. The crew still had decisions to make regarding the survivors, the alien technology, and the potential consequences of revealing the weapon's existence. But for now, they had achieved what many thought impossible. They had stabilized the situation, protected lives, and harnessed a power of unimaginable potential. The resolution was both a triumph and a reminder that responsibility and courage were inseparable from true power. The experience also sparked deeper reflection on humanity's place in the cosmos. Monroe and the other crew members realized that humans were no longer passive observers in interstellar affairs. They had the knowledge, the skill, and the capacity to influence outcomes on a scale that few could imagine. Yet with that recognition came humility. They understood that the universe was vast, unpredictable, and often indifferent to human concerns. The encounter had shown them both the fragility and resilience of life, and the delicate balance between power and responsibility. Humanity had awoken a force of incredible potential, and now it was up to them to ensure that potential was directed toward protection, not destruction. Captain Valdez documented the events in the ship's official logs, noting the bravery of the crew, the cooperation with the alien survivors, and the careful management of the weapon. These records would remain classified for the foreseeable future, both to protect the survivors and to prevent the knowledge of the weapon from spreading prematurely. Yet the process of documenting the mission provided the crew with a sense of closure. It was a way to reflect on their actions, acknowledge their successes and mistakes, and understand the broader implications of their choices. Each entry in the log reinforced a central truth that humanity's power lay not only in technology, but in wisdom, courage, and the ability to act ethically under pressure. The survivors prepared to leave the station under human guidance, boarding transport shuttles to return to safer locations. Farewells were exchanged with a mix of gratitude, solemnity, and hope. The humans had become more than rescuers. They had become allies, teachers, and custodians of a shared responsibility. Monroe watched them depart, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and melancholy. The encounter had changed him, and he knew it had changed humanity's trajectory as well. They had touched a new level of interstellar significance, and the decisions they had made would influence events far beyond their immediate awareness. Back aboard the Orion's watch, the crew took a moment to rest and recover. Tension, fatigue, and adrenaline had defined the past days, but now there was a rare opportunity for reflection. Conversations turned to the lessons learned, the importance of trust, the value of careful planning under pressure, and the necessity of balancing power with ethical responsibility. Each crew member shared thoughts, fears, and hopes for the future, recognizing that their experience had forged bonds that would last a lifetime. They had not merely survived, they had grown, as individuals and as representatives of humanity, capable of facing challenges that were previously unimaginable. The aftermath also involved planning for the future. Earth's leadership would eventually need to know, but the timing and framing of that information required careful thought. The weapon's existence, and the knowledge gained from the station, represented both a strategic advantage and a profound ethical challenge. The crew discussed scenarios in which humanity might use the technology responsibly, ways to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands, and how to guide interactions with other civilizations to avoid unnecessary conflict. These discussions were thoughtful, deliberate, and sometimes somber, reflecting the deep responsibility now resting on human shoulders. Despite the gravity of their task, the crew also found moments of quiet humanity. Small celebrations, shared meals, and light-hearted conversations allowed them to process what they had experienced. Humor, camaraderie, and simple human connection became vital as they prepared to return to Earth. These moments reinforced the idea that even in the face of galactic-scale challenges, the essence of humanity, its resilience, creativity, and empathy remained central to survival and success. They had confronted the worst, and yet had found ways to maintain their humanity throughout. As the Orion's watch began its journey home, the crew reflected on the meaning of their mission. The distress call that had initially seemed like a simple request for help had evolved into an epic confrontation, revealing both danger and opportunity. Humanity had demonstrated courage, intelligence, and ethical discernment in ways that would resonate far beyond their immediate actions. The weapon they had stabilized, the survivors they had saved, and the knowledge they had gained all represented a turning point, a moment when humanity awakened not just a powerful tool, but a recognition of its own capacity to shape the galaxy responsibly. Dr. Monroe, staring out at the endless expanse of stars, realized that the experience had forever changed him. He understood the fragility of life, the weight of responsibility, and the incredible potential that humans could wield when guided by courage, morality, and intelligence. The lessons of the station, the weapon, and the survivors would remain with him, informing his decisions and shaping his understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos. He knew that future encounters would be inevitable, but he also understood that humanity was now equipped to face them with wisdom and strength. The reflection continued long after the immediate mission was complete. The crew contemplated the broader philosophical questions, the ethics of power, the responsibilities of knowledge, and the role of humanity in a universe filled with unknowns. They recognized that every choice, every action, and every decision had consequences that might extend far beyond their perception. The mission had been a crucible, testing not just skill and courage, but the very essence of what it meant to be human. In emerging from that crucible, the crew had discovered the depth of their potential and the importance of guiding it with conscience and foresight. By the time Earth came into view, the crew of the Orion's Watch had completed a journey far greater than anyone could have imagined. They had responded to a distress call, confronted overwhelming danger, stabilized a weapon of unimaginable power, and preserved lives. More than that, they had reflected deeply on the meaning of their actions and the responsibilities they now carried. Humanity had awakened a power in the galaxy, but it had also awakened an understanding of its own capacity for courage, wisdom, and ethical leadership. The journey was over in a physical sense, but the lessons, reflections, and consequences would resonate for years to come, shaping the future of humanity among the stars. In the end, the crew understood a simple yet profound truth. Power without responsibility was dangerous, knowledge without wisdom was incomplete, and courage without ethical direction was hollow. They had faced the deadliest challenges imaginable, but through collaboration, insight, and restraint, they had turned potential destruction into survival and triumph. The galaxy remained vast, mysterious, and perilous, but humanity had proven that when faced with the ultimate test, it could rise to meet it and emerge not just victorious, but wiser and more aware of its place in the cosmos.